The Vathai did not wear armor. This was the first thing Corvo noticed, and the last thing she understood. She had read the briefing documents on the transit from Secondus Station, 300 pages of Vathai cultural summary compiled by xenoanthropologists who had, she suspected, never actually stood in a Vathai camp at the edge of a crystalline plain with the wind cutting through at 40 kilometers per hour. The documents said, the Vathai are a plated species. Natural calcification begins in infancy and completes by the 4th year of life. The adult Vathai body presents approximately 63% surface coverage in layered calcium silicate plate grown from within, renewed annually, as individual as a fingerprint. The documents did not say, they move like architecture. They did not say, standing among them is like standing in a forest that watches you back. Thesivar of the third plate was the commander of the forward observation post at the crystalline border of Vath Secundus, and he was the first Vathai to speak to Corvo directly. He was tall. They were all tall, 2.5 meters of slow metabolic grace, and the plating across his shoulders and chest had the blue-gray iridescence of old growth, the kind that came from decades of renewal cycles. His translator pendant, a concession to the diplomatic protocols his government had signed, and apparently not yet forgiven, rendered his words into Corvo's earpiece with a slight half-second delay that gave every sentence the quality of something reconsidered. "You wear an outer covering," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," Corvo said, "standard composite, rated for." "You will remove it before joining formation." The wind moved across the plain. Somewhere in the distance, the crystal formations that gave Vath Secundus its name caught the light and threw it in long, cold arcs across the gray ground. Corvo did not remove it. She tried to explain. The translator struggled with the concept of soft tissue, of organs without protection, of a species that emerged from its evolutionary history with no natural armor whatsoever, and had spent the intervening millennia engineering substitutes. The Vathai soldiers behind Thesivar listened without expression, which in a species whose face was 60% calcified plate was not necessarily the same as listening without feeling. "Your body," Thesivar said after she had finished, "cannot protect itself." "Correct," Corvo said. He considered this for a long moment. The wind moved again. She watched his plating shift very slightly, a movement like the settling of a building, she thought, though the xenoanthropology documents had not prepared her for what that motion signified. "Then you are," he said carefully, "incomplete." She had prepared for this. The briefings had flagged it, armor as cultural confession, as biological inadequacy made visible. To add protection to the body was to announce that the body was insufficient. Among the Vathai, this was not merely embarrassing. It occupied a category adjacent to mourning, the public acknowledgement of a loss that could not be recovered. "Among my people," Corvo said, "we say, know what you are and build accordingly." The translator rendered this. Thesivar's plating shifted again. He did not respond directly. He turned and walked toward the head of the formation, and the Vathai soldiers moved to follow, and after a moment Corvo followed them, her composite suit sealed against the cold. Her presence tolerated the way a field researcher's presence is always tolerated, as a fact that has been accepted without being approved. The patrol moved out across the crystal plain. Corvo walked in formation and said nothing and watched everything, which was, she had found, the only way to begin learning anything at all. The plain was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are. The crystal formations rose from the gray substrate in clusters, some low and flat, some reaching 3 or 4 meters in fractal spires that caught the low sun and scattered it into cold rainbows. The Vathai moved through them without hesitation, the sound of their plating in contact with the crystal a low, resonant ticking, like a clock made of stone. Corvo moved more carefully. The formations were sharp at the edges, in ways that the word crystal did not quite convey. Not the decorative crystal of human ornament, but the crystal of geology, of pressure and mineral patience, of material that had never been asked to be soft. She was still learning what they were watching for when the drone arrived. The drone did not announce themselves. Corvo had read the drone briefings too, though they were shorter and less nuanced than the Vathai documents, which told her something about the quality of diplomatic relations. The drone were a pressure sac species, bilateral, fast, low to the ground. Their primary offensive biology, a system of acid glands that could project at range with reasonable accuracy. The acid was corrosive to calcium silicate plate. The briefing had noted this with the bureaucratic neutrality of a document written by someone who had never been standing in a crystal formation when it happened. The ambush came from 3 positions simultaneously, which suggested coordination that the briefings had not predicted. The acid came in streams, not droplets, pressurized, sustained, the color of old copper, and it hit the lead formation of Vathai soldiers before anyone had finished turning. The sound it made on the Vathai plating was wrong. Not the resonant tick of crystal contact, but something that had no good analog. A dissolution, a slow consumption, the sound of material losing the argument with chemistry. The 2 soldiers at the point of the formation went down in less than 30 seconds, their plating compromised at the shoulder and chest, their mobility suddenly and catastrophically reduced. Thessavar was moving, turning, calling out in Vathai that came too fast for the translator to catch. A 3rd soldier took a sustained stream across the back of his leg and collapsed. The acid hit Corvo's suit. She felt the impact, a pressure, a slight increase in thermal reading on her left forearm display, a hiss she could hear through the suit's external audio. The composite held. The acid ran down the surface of the suit and fell away, leaving a discoloration, a slight surface texture where the outermost layer had traded some of its integrity for the soldier's life, exactly as it was designed to do. The suit had been designed by engineers who had cataloged 47 categories of environmental and weapons threat, and built redundancy into every layer of response, because the people who built it had started from the assumption that they would be wrong about something and engineered accordingly. Corvo was already moving. She reached the first down soldier, a young Vathai, by the size of the plating. The growth patterns not yet fully set, and got her arms under the compromised shoulder plate and pulled. The Vathai made a sound she had not heard before, and she moved anyway, dragging him behind the nearest crystal formation, the acid continuing to fall around her in streams that her suit deflected without discussion. She went back for the second. Thessavar was returning fire. The Vathai carried kinetic weapons, long-barreled, designed for their own physiology, and the sound they made was enormous in the crystal field, the reports bouncing back from every surface. But his plating at the chest was compromised now too, the acid having found a seam, and she could see from the way he was standing that the damage was affecting his movement. He would not say so. She understood from the briefings that he would not say so until he could not stand at all. She reached the 3rd soldier, the one whose leg was compromised. He was attempting to rise on his own. She helped him. He did not resist her help, which she noted as significant without having time to think about what it signified. The drone positions broke within 4 minutes of the first contact. The kinetic fire had found them, or they had run out of acid, or both. The plane went quiet except for the wind and the sound of crystal settling, and 2 Vathai soldiers breathing in ways that suggested their next hours would be difficult. Corvo stood in the aftermath, and her suit reported minimal integrity loss, a surface discoloration across the left arm and the lower torso, nothing structural, nothing that the secondary layer had not already begun compensating for. Thessavar looked at her. The half-second translation delay meant she had time to see the expression, which was not an expression exactly, not in a face that was 2/3 plate, but something in the orientation, the stillness, before his words arrived in her ear. The covering, he said, it held. Yes, she said. He did not say anything else. Around them, The other Vathai soldiers were seeing to their wounded and saying nothing either, and the silence had a quality she had not encountered in any briefing document. Thesivar asked her that evening what her armor was made of. They were in the field shelter, a low structure the Vathai had placed against a crystal formation for windbreak, open on one side to the darkening plain. The two compromised soldiers had been stabilized. The third was resting. The acid damage to Thesivar's chest plating was visible now, a cratered discoloration, and in the low light it looked, Corvo thought, like something grieved over. She unlatched the left arm of her suit and laid it on the flat rock between them. He looked at it for a long time before touching it. "Layers," he said. 43, she said. Each one rated for different threats, some for kinetic impact, some for thermal, two specifically for chemical, acid, base, reactive compounds. The outer layers are sacrificial. They absorb damage so the inner layers are preserved. Sacrificial, he said. The translator paused slightly on the word, as if uncertain which of its meanings to carry forward. They give up their integrity, so the structure inside continues. He turned the arm panel over. Where the acid had struck, the outer surface was scarred, a mottled texture, the material slightly compressed. He ran one broad finger across it. "Your people made this," he said, not quite a question. "My people made this because we are soft inside," Corvo said. "We have no plate. We have no natural protection beyond what the skin provides, which is almost nothing. We learned very early that we were vulnerable, and rather than accept that as a fact about our limits, we treated it as a problem to be solved." Other Vathai had moved closer without her noticing. The soldiers from the patrol, gathered in the informal way that people gather when something is happening that they do not have a category for yet. One of them, the young soldier she had pulled from the first acid stream, crouched at the edge of the light. Thesivar set the arm panel down. He said something in Vathai, and the translator did not catch all of it, but what it caught was, "They begin from lack and they build from there." "You are not ashamed," the young soldier said. His Vathai was slower, more careful, learner's speech, formal speech. Corvo recognized it. "To show the armor. You were not ashamed." "No," Corvo said. "Why would I be?" He didn't answer. She thought she understood why. The Vathai philosophy of sufficiency was ancient. She had read that much. A species that grew its protection from within, that renewed it annually, that could look at its own body and see completeness. They had built an entire ethical architecture around the idea that the sufficient body required no supplement. To add was to confess. To confess was to diminish. She had arrived confessing everything loudly, in 43 layers. Thesivar picked up the arm panel again. He held it beside his own arm, the acid-damaged plate and the acid-damaged composite side by side in the low light. "Your material lost its outer surface," he said. "My plate lost its integrity." "Yes. Yours will be repaired. The outer layers will be replaced. The structure underneath is intact." He set it down again. He was quiet for a long time. The wind came across the plain and made the crystal formations sing in low, resonant harmonics. "We have not changed our doctrine in 400 years, he said finally. "The plating is sufficient. The plating has always been sufficient. The Droon began using acid compounds 60 years ago, and we sustained losses, and we adapted our tactics, and we kept the plating." He paused. Because to change the plating would have meant acknowledging that the plating was not in itself complete. Corvo said nothing. This was the moment that required nothing from her. "You arrived," he said, "incomplete, and you walked away from acid." He reached up, a slow movement, deliberate, the quality of ceremony, and pressed his fingers to the damaged plate at his chest. The Vathai watching did not move. The young soldier at the edge of the light had gone very still. Then Thesivar did something she did not understand until later, when she had learned enough Vathai to ask. He unlatched a section of his chest plate, a small piece, one of the overlapping scales at the lower left, where the damage was worst, and removed it. The skin beneath was pale and soft in a way she had not expected, the texture of something that had never seen light. He set the plate on the rock beside her arm panel. The Vathai soldiers were silent. She would learn later that the act had a name, that it was performed at the end of a military campaign, between commanders who had each brought something necessary to a shared survival, that it was not grief, exactly, though it contained grief, that it was not gratitude, exactly, though it contained that too, that the Vathai word for it translated, approximately, as, "I see what I did not know was missing." That evening she did not know any of that. She only knew that his plate and her arm panel sat side by side on the cold stone in the last of the light. Two kinds of armor, grown and made, biological and engineered, complete in different ways, incomplete in different ways, and that the crystal plain outside was quiet, and the wind had stopped. She did not touch his plate. He did not touch hers again. They sat with the distance between the objects and let it mean what it meant. Outside, the crystal formations rose against the dark sky, patient and sharp, and full of light that had nowhere left to go.